Hi, this is Margaret Meloni, and welcome to the Death Dhamma Podcast. Open and honest discussions with wise and skillful teachers about their experiences with life, death, and Buddhism. If you wonder how others on the path have dealt with death and dying and grief, then be sure to listen in. Everybody has a story, a perspective, and a valuable lesson to share. Embrace death, live a full life, and learn how to love impermanence. Because as my dear father used to say, nobody gets out of this alive. Hi everyone. Today I am sharing my discussion with Venerable Guan Zhen. He has been a Buddhist monk for 20 years in the Chinese Chan tradition. He has a Master's of Divinity, specializing in Buddhist chaplaincy, and a master's degree in social work. From 2012 until 2014, he was a chaplain in our U.S. Army. Now he's focusing more on hospital work, and he's doing some work with Stanford Healthcare. And of course, this means that he has done lots of spiritual care, and definitely with the terminally ill and the families of the dying. And as we join the discussion, he is sharing the privilege that he feels when, as a chaplain, he works with a family who might come from a different tradition, but are still accepting of the love and support that he is bringing to them.
Hospital chaplaincy is very interface. I got to visit a couple of the patients passed away and family around, and they are Catholic. Mm-hmm. I went in there and they called me father, and they received me really well, and I feel really honored when they call me father, and I feel privileged to be with them and be able to pray with them, and that was such touching. Yeah, and
that
also
is, that's an amazing, I'll say, level of acceptance and recognition of you and of you as someone who's there to help them through the spiritual process, even if you're wearing a different robe than a priest. That's nice.
Right, and that kind of feeling is that you feel all kind of privilege and spirituality you have bring into the present moment of the suffering. And that is very, to me as a spiritual or religious leader in the community, that's all about the meanings of life.
And I thank you so much for what you're saying, because I feel like what you're saying is that to be there with a family and with someone as they're dying is a privilege.
It is a privilege. And also being able to, in Buddhist teaching, being able to be in present witnessing the process of suffering or grief, that is just a privilege. And in that process also you see how meaningful be able to be present as well. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm going to go back a little bit, I guess, maybe in history or in your history. Yeah. Would you share when there was a time in your life when you realized death was real? And I say that because I think we, as people, human beings, we understand there's death, but sometimes we don't really understand there's death until, there's knowing it, and then there's knowing it, in the head and the heart. Would you share with us when you really became aware of death?
I definitely agree with you, Margaret. If you look at we knowing friends or either relatives pass away, but we don't feel that kind of close until your loved ones pass away. And you feel truly there's like an arrow shooting in your heart, and all kind of feelings, sadness, grief is coming out. It's kind of your heart bleeding, and you just cannot stop that kind of bleeding and feeling of sadness. So the close one I personally experienced was my father passed away in 2012, in the end of January. So when I received the message and got a call from China, so I was broken out. It's in the evening, so I just could not stop crying. And I feel so sad. It's kind of my whole body kind of out of control in a way. And I feel my body is shaking, my muscle is shaking. And I was trying to tell myself it's okay not to cry, but actually it just automatically just quiet now. You just cannot control it. And that kind of feeling is so strong. Yeah.
It is. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your level of honesty, and it's going to be so helpful to people, because the reason that I'm reaching out to those of you who are Buddhist spiritual teachers is to show the rest of us that it's human to feel this loss and pain. And I mean, that analogy that you gave, like an arrow in your heart, when you said that, I felt it, because I remember that. It's like, it is like an arrow in your heart. And at that point, I think you'd been a monk for 12 years. And I think it's so important for people to understand that everyone can feel the pain of grief. And, Buddhism helps us, but it doesn't mean we won't feel pain of grief. So thank you for that deep honesty.
Right. And Margaret, definitely, we as a humans, or either in the process of making to enlightenment, there's all kind of emotions we experience and we recognize and we embrace with. So death and grief, sadness definitely is part of human emotions. And be able to recognize them and experience them is also a path to enlightenment. So that's my understanding.
So I feel it, and I feel like you're saying that it really hits you in your body, like you really felt it physically. Is that true? Like you had a physical reaction?
Right. Physically, reaction is like a chemical, all kind of chemical stuff in your body just coming out. I mean, at a moment you realize you think you have control of your body, but basically, no, you have not. It's so strong.
Yeah.
It was so strong, and the tears is just coming out, and I was crying, and I live in the monastery, and my next door, the Venerable, the next day morning, he told me, I hear you last night were crying and laughing. I said, no, I just crying. I did not laughing. The way you hear, I was laughing, that I was trying to control myself crying. So it makes different sounds. But Margaret, definitely that kind of emotion, grief and sadness is so overwhelming, so tremendous in the moment when you receive that kind of message. And it's back to your question, the personal experience of death, that was so tremendous. And it is nothing can compare to you where your friend passed away or your relative passed away. It is very different. It is. Yeah.
So because you went through that, do you feel better equipped to help others now? Because we come to you as a Buddhist monk for help with our life and our emotions and our different things in life. But so do you feel like now you can be even more helpful for people going through death and dying and grief?
Right. That's definitely. If you look at the whole process you're going through with that kind of sadness, griefness, and like time is the best healing, and you go through the time and you'll be able to look at back and to revisit that kind of feeling emotions. Then once you are going in someone's, once you encounter someone in that situation, you will be able to put your feet in their shoes. And that's very important. That kind of, I will say humans share the same emotions at a certain point.
So you can feel with them.
Right, and at a certain moment. And in that moment, for example, I was talking about at the beginning, the patients passed away, I was able to witness it. So the witnessing is kind of simply you were there and have your face in their shoes. You even don't have to say a word. It just, that kind of feeling and connection, it naturally built up, and that was such a comfort for the family.
So they can feel that you are with them compassionately and lovingly.
Right, and also with honesty.
Yes.
Because you have experienced that grief, sadness, you become honest with the feelings, become honest with that kind of grief and sadness, and you just recognize them. And I think that's good enough to be there. Yeah.
I think it's great. I think it's beyond good enough, but I understand what you're saying. You're right. There is that level of honesty. I have observed sometimes people who are in spiritual roles, in chaplain roles and others, that sometimes they still aren't ready to deal with death. And I don't know if you've seen that, but sometimes it's true, maybe because they haven't had to experience it yet, or they don't want to revisit the experience.
I think that could be the case if the grief or sadness is so overwhelming and the chaplain wasn't able to deal with himself or herself. That could be the case, like a post-trauma could be in a way, and that would make he or she unable to deal with this kind of case because it brought back so much suffering and pain he or she wasn't able to deal with. Then that kind of scenario could become, very challenging to deal with.
Yeah, I think it's important that, because so like a chaplain, filling different roles. And so you could be one day working with a child who's having their tonsils out, which is typically not threatening. But you could also be dealing with that, saying goodbye. And so it's important, I guess, to have the right chaplain on call for the right situation.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't all do death work. If we can go back to, and so I didn't realize that your father died in 2012. That's when my father died too.
Oh gosh.
My father was just later in the year. Yeah. So your dad was in January. My dad was in November. And I think you were already away from the school at that point. So we weren't in communication. So yeah, we lost our fathers the same year. But so going back to you're at your monastery and you're just hit with this incredible sadness. And how did your teachers, your master and your other peer monks, how did they help you?
The Venerable at the temple were really helpful. They were able to give me space.
Okay.
Allow me to grieve and also allow me to take some time off.
Okay.
And they tell me if there's anything we can help, just let us know. And I think that's really good enough. Be able to give you space, time, and also support. That's all what I needed at the moment. So because Margaret, when you have the loved one pass away, the feeling of grief and sadness is so heavy. It's like a mountain, put on your top, and you have to hold that mountain and try to stand up. So it is very heavy, and I don't think at that moment any words can come for you. The only thing that people can come for you or you feel supportive is that give you space and be able to say it is okay for you to take some time off and be supportive.
That is nice. Yeah. So it's just understand and allow.
Yeah.
So they allowed you to be sad.
Right.
They allowed you to be sad. Nobody gave you any lectures about you're a monk or, this is impermanent. Like nobody did that. They just let you be sad.
Most of them did not do that because I think probably the training in Buddhism. But there's one Venerable. He was trying to comfort me in a way, saying so many positive things, but I did not feel that way.
Right.
I feel. I was grateful for him, but the words it doesn't just the words were not really hitting in my heart. It's like the rain coming down, but it had roof on the top, so it actually did not come down.
Yes.
Because all those positives, it sounds so empty in that moment.
Empty. And not good emptiness.
It's not good emptiness.
Not the emptiness we were seeking. Yeah. That is really good to know. I understand. I didn't understand maybe until it was my turn. There are things, at least in the culture I grew up in, where there's things we're trained to say. And I understand now that those things are not useful and they're not helpful, and they make maybe the person who says them feel better, but it doesn't help the person who's grieving. He's in a better place. If you're in a Judeo-Christian world, you might say this was part of God's plan. In Buddhism, people will say, well, that's his karma, or that's your karma. And none of those things are helpful. At least they were not helpful to me. And so I guess like you're sharing that experience.
Right. And I would say, for example, one of them might tell me, your father have been Buddhist, have been practicing, so he must be in the pure then. And I feel that's really good for him to tell me that. But at the moment, it doesn't. I mean, it did not really do that much to my feelings. So.
Because if your father was in the Pure Land, that's great. That's what we would want. But I don't think that's why we're sad. Most of us, like I wasn't sad. So my father was, Catholic. So if I was thinking of things in his terms, I wasn't sad. Like I wasn't worried about where my father went next.
Yeah.
I was sad because my father wasn't here.
That was my feeling at the moment too.
Yes.
And because probably that's also culture in my part. Because my father passed away when he was 59, relatively young. So in a way, I feel, there's so many things I did not say to my father, At least I did not really get to say thank you for in fact, thank you for having me in this world experience. And thank you me, to give me life in so many ways, because he passed away without me in present. So there was I would say there's a feeling sadness, great, tremendous grief, and also combined with the guilt, the sense of guilt as well. So definitely it, like Margaret mentioned about, it's not about either my father going to Pure Land or not, but it's about I wouldn't be able in present. My father is no longer here. That's what I feel.
And that's what we're grieving, which to me, understanding impermanence helped me understand. Like it didn't stop me from grieving, but it helped me not fight, I guess, the grieving. Like not say, why did this have to happen? Why did they have to die? Why do I have to go through this? Like we have the answers in Buddhism. We know why.
Yeah, I think in Buddhism we know that death is a illness and death is a natural process of human.
Yes.
And everyone had to go through this, and that kind of teaching really helps. But there is after a while, after time passing, and you realize that tremendous moment of sadness, grief, fading away in the time. So I began to become aware of your feelings, emotions, and be able back to present moment and back to the teachings.
So as you went through your own grief, and the initial thing that helped you was for people to just let you grieve and accept that you were grieving. And then as you step forward, what did you do to help yourself? What helped you the most that you did yourself?
I think two things are really helping. And I will put the first thing is a time.
So it's that time has to pass.
Time has to pass. And time also allow you to look at your relationship with your father in all these past years, even from back to the childhood. And time allow you to revisit your feelings, your emotions, and be able to, even I wasn't able to say thank you to my father and thanks for having me, but in the time I was, kind of doing prayers and back there, kind of sending that wishing and also transmitting the memory I've been doing. And also time allowed me to look at my true feelings of sadness, grief, and also allow me to develop or continue the love and compassion I have. That was, gained from the grief I lost my father, and that was time, and also time is the process for me to reflect on my teachings as well. So I would say
time is our friend and time is our difficulty, I guess, right? Because when it's early on, the day of a month later, it's so intense and difficult. And then a year later, it's still like, even today, I'm guessing in some ways you still miss your father.
Yep.
But definitely. Now, right?
Margaret, I would say it takes more than a year.
Absolutely.
It takes more than a year. My feeling was that in the first half, 6 months, it was really it was really challenging. Every time I thought about my father, there was so much memories going on, and so much things I want to say. And after 1 year, is that occasionally you will revisit that kind of emotion and feelings. And I will say it is after 1.5 year you be able to feel much better in a way. Yeah.
That makes sense. I think that it was around 1.5 years where I think I started feeling normal, whatever normal means, right? But I remember one time I was sitting, and it was after my mother had died, and I was she lived in another state, and I was visiting to close her house and take care of family business. And I was sitting there with a family friend, and I know she meant well. And she said, "Oh, you think the first year is hard? Just wait till the second year." And in that moment, I will tell you, I just was kind of angry, and I just wanted to say something really unkind, like "shut up," but I didn't. But I was thinking that. But I understood later she meant to be helpful.
Yeah.
There was some truth in what she said.
So it sounds like your mom very honest with the reality.
Yes.
About feeling of death, feeling of sadness, grief.
Yes. And it was a person who had already lost her husband, and she had lost her father. And my mother had been a good friend of hers, and my mother was dead. And so I think she really meant to be helpful, but I think I just didn't want to hear that, because at the time I just thought, well, it's going to be a really hard year. And I don't know what I thought, Venerable, silly things. I just thought, like, at the end of the year, like, it would be magic and then I would be fine. And that's not the truth of it.
I think it will never be true.
Margaret. It will never be true. You're so right.
Yeah. And especially if for losing the really loved ones, for example, son and father has still, it's very close, but still that looks to me, there's still, a veil is between. So like a curtains in between. So you can see your father, but not as your mother see your father, So it took my mother for years. Even today, I mentioned to her, he was suffering. And I can understand, for example, Margaret, if your husband passed away, that will feel like a whole heaven collapse.
Absolutely. Yes.
It's more than a mountain on your top. It's like, like I said, some fathers still had that kind of curtain between. So you feel that kind of feeling already very strong. But if a husband and wife, there's no curtain between.
It's true. It's true. I mean, especially when you really love one another. I will say that there were times when I felt like I had been cut in half.
Yeah.
Not horizontally, vertically, just cut right down the middle vertically. Like I was just this half thing walking around. Absolutely. Yeah. It is. You just feel like part of your body's been cut.
Right. And my mom told me it's like, I was a tear in pieces. It's a 9.5. It's like, there's no way to piece together. So that kind of feeling, it was really tremendous. And right, your mom was honest with you. Wait for the time to.
Yes.
Some time. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It was honesty. I just didn't want to hear it. But in hindsight, I recognized the truth. I was being told. I just wasn't ready to hear the truth.
Right.
Yeah. So that's unfortunate. But was there anything that surprised you about your experience with dealing with death and grieving?
That surprised me is that I think it surprised me that I'm, even after all these years of practice, I'm still a normal person.
Okay.
I'm not a sage, and I'm still grieve at others, but it surprised me on the other way. Through the experience of death, I began to realize the reality of things, and began to become much able to look at my feelings, emotions in a way, and also you back away talking about all these year Buddhist trainings I have received, is that be able to allow me to transform that kind of feelings into some sort of loving kindness and compassion, and be able to fully be present when I was being present with someone's death. You totally just fully understand, fully be present, And even that's doing nothing, it is really profound in a way, because you bring all that kind of awareness, that kind of the wisdom, or either the compassion or love you have with, and your experience with them.
Thank you. You know, you're helping me with something that I wonder about sometimes, which is as we move forward in Buddhism and we evolve, sometimes I wonder, is it that we're meant to not have the feelings, or is it that we are meant to, we still have the feelings, but it's how we recognize and sit with and deal with the feelings? So like, do you think an enlightened being doesn't have the feelings?
That at least that's not what I've been taught in my tradition. Chan tradition, it says only stone has no feelings.
Thank you.
Only stone or mountain has no feeling. Even mountains sometimes have feelings. You take stone, it might hit back to the environment. But only stone has no feelings. As a humans, you are supposed to have feelings. And those feelings are the transitioning point for enlightenment.
So we must have the feelings. If we want to move forward, we must have the feelings.
And not only feelings, it also had to experience it. So also be able to raise questions. For example, in Chan Buddhism, it says, in the life, the bigger question you have, the bigger enlightenment you achieve.
Oh.
The small question you have, the small enlightenment you have. And it speaks very true. If you're talking about sadness, so if you're talking, I just lost my job, I feel sad. That's a small enlightenment you have.
Yes.
But if you're talking about, my loved one just passed away, I feel really sad and grief. And if you'll be able to go through that process and transforming that kind of emotion, or be able to embrace that kind of emotion, experience it truly, honestly, then there's a moment of big enlightenment in your life. By saying big enlightenment is that you become much more capable to look at a reality and the meaning of life itself. And that did into the whole point of the Four Noble Truths teachings. So,
is it fair to think that some of these big, difficult things that happen to us are actually gifts to our teaching and to our path, our Buddhist paths?
I think it could be held as a gift, but also I think a gift is a good word to say.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember somebody told that to me one time. How did she say it? And I didn't disagree with her at the time. I just wasn't, again, it's all about, you're so right. It's so much about time and how we can process things. But I remember she said, you've been given this amazing gift, because if you can get through this, and it's like, okay. And I understand that. Definitely. It is, in a way, absolutely an opportunity to grow in my practice that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And so in that way, I do feel a kind of gratitude, but it doesn't mean I don't miss the people I loved. Like
you should not. We should always keep the loved ones in mind. When they're in practice, and that's you, and that's the way of practice.
It helps me understand better, because in some cultures, and in China, I feel like there's more recognition of respect for our ancestors. And some of us, so like, I was born in the West here in the United States and raised in the United States. And so we haven't always understood the practice of ancestors, but Buddhism has helped me. Buddhism and death have helped me understand that, because when, people will have, say, like an altar for their mother on the anniversary of their mother's death. Before Buddhism, I would not have understood that. And I would have, because altars in Western religion mean something different, right? And now I understand it's not that you're worshiping your dead mother, it's that you're just keeping her alive respectfully. Is that fair to say it that way?
Right. Even in China, I mean, Confucianism probably a different saying, but for Taoism, Buddhism, to have ancestors is there to remind yourself how much love you have been received from your ancestor, and also to to look at as an example for you to live on, as a strength for you to live on. That's a Buddhism and Taoism teaching.
Yeah.
And also like you had the ancestors put on, or either your loved one that put it on. It kind of, you have every day the loved one look at you with love and with with good memories you have, and that's become strength of your life every day coming in. So in China, it's the same way. For example, if a son put up his father's as an ancestor pass away, they are reminded the son always the good deeds of the father, and be taking the father as an example and feel the love of the father be around, so that make it life keep going on and pass down that kind of the love and strength to others.
They're our teachers. They are our teachers.
They are teachers.
I think we've maybe answered this, but I just want to circle back. Do you feel like there was like a specific teaching or meditation that helped you that you would encourage others to use during this type of situation, during grieving?
I think that's one teaching I practiced and I feel is really helpful. It's understanding the teaching or dependent origination.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Would you tell us about that?
So at first, but that's not enough. It's only for you to look at how things naturally arising, staying, and then fading away. So it kind of helping you understand the natural process of the person dying, and you become much easier or become able to accept what's already gone. It is, yeah. But also the teaching of compassion and loving kindness never resonate with me the best. So I will say, teaching the compassion is a kind of not only develop your compassion, but kind of like we have been talking and mentioned about, be able to transcend your grief and be able to bring your loved ones' compassion and love into your life, and then passing it down, compassion and loving kindness. Yeah.
Yes, in two different ways. So if you happen to be going through a loved one who is dying, like who doesn't just die in their sleep, but who goes through a protracted illness, absolutely because I remember there are times when you look at this person and you're like, is that my person? They're different today, and they're different because they're dying. And so there's that need to be compassionate when they do or say something that seems upsetting. I can remember that every once in a while looking at, especially as my husband was dying, sometimes just looking at him and going, who is that? And then we're thinking, my job, if I can say it that way, is to try to be as compassionate to him as possible and not get upset if he does or says something that seems odd or even hurtful, because he doesn't mean it.
Right.
He's going through his death process. And my job, I felt, is to help him have the best death possible, which means to be compassionate. And then after, it's the compassion to yourself.
Yeah. And Margaret, I really agree with you to have compassion in that processing, because for your husband or either for anyone is in the process, transitioning. In our teaching, death is not the end. It's a process. It's a process of transitioning. That means we depend on only dependent origination. So we have this life, but in the end, we transition into the other, dimensions.
Right, and we want that to be as good as possible.
Yeah. So compassion is definitely, and loving kindness in that transitioning point. It does makes very difference. And like you mentioned, you had compassion. Even you point to a really good point here is that when a person in transitioning point because of physical, mental challenging or hardships they're facing, there could be a lot of anger or either confusion, or either unable to letting go in so many ways. So as a person being able to be in present, especially at the loved ones, I think a compassion and loving kindness at the moment is very important to helping your husband or others transition in the
It's
point.
an important teaching, and look at how much that compassion can help us in any part of life. I mean, you and I were talking about a very difficult thing or potentially difficult thing, but in all aspects of our lives, just that compassion, waiting in line at the grocery store or driving in traffic, right? It's always
Right.
always helpful. It's like aspirin. It helps with almost everything.
It's like a water. It brings life everywhere.
There you go. I love that. That's better. Yeah, we need it all the time.
Yeah,
We cannot live without it.
right. I mean, most of the time, our emotion feelings is just like a rock or some kind of fire burning off. But compassion, loving kindness is like a water. It always give you life and bring you back to present moment.
Yes, it's giving of life. I love that.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. What is something maybe you wanted to share or say that I didn't ask you? Is there something that you haven't had a chance to share? I want to make sure that you get to do that.
I think we almost share everything already, but there's one, couple of things I want to say. It is okay to experience grief.
Thank you so much.
Right, like we had talked about, grief is a part of our human emotions. Be able to recognize it and embrace and experience it. And this can be, it can be very challenging, very tough, but it also allows us to grow and understand the true meaning of life, including ourselves. And also, if we embrace and experience the grief, it also allowed us as an individual to develop what we have been talking about, compassion, and also loving kindness, or simply love in present moment. So I think that this is very important. And if all I have to give, that's all. It's okay to grieve.
Thank you. And you're so humble, because that's all I have to give. I think that is an amazing gift that you're giving right there. You can be a Buddhist and you can be sad and you can grieve, and this is part of our practice.
Right. And like I said, in our tradition, in Chan tradition, if you don't grieve, you don't sad, probably you're just a piece of rock. You're not human at all.
That's right. Don't be a rock.
Don't be a rock. Sometimes it's good to be a rock, but not all the time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, rocks have their purposes. That's true. We need rocks. Rocks held up things. Rocks help build buildings. Rocks help mountains stay up.
But rocks sometimes is too hot and cold. It has no temperature. But we do have temperature, and those temperatures are warming up. You sharing others, and temperature is like a grief, sadness. It all composed together. Be nice to yourself, and be compassionate with yourself, and be able to look through what's emotion going on in the mind. Be able to transform and bring back compassion and love.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your sharing. And it's, of course, lovely to talk to you again, since it's been a few years. This has been the Death Dhamma Podcast with Margaret Meloni. Thank you for being here. Your reviews and comments are greatly appreciated. And please come find me on margaretmeloni.com. MargaretMeloni. And don't forget to check out Carpooling with Death, How Living with Death Will Make You Stronger, Wiser, and Fearless. Available in all your favorite formats over on Amazon. And most importantly, may you be well. May you be happy. May you be safe, at ease, and free from suffering. Bye for now.